Hello, everyone. I'm John Favreau, the non-Hollywood John Favreau. So sorry to disappoint anyone. I'm the host of Pod Save America, podcast about politics, as a former speechwriter for Barack Obama. Thank you. But I am very happy tonight to introduce the executive producer and showrunner of The Boys, the extremely talented Eric Kripke.
Hey.
Hey there.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah. So I was telling you backstage, I caught up on the show over the last few weeks, just binged the show. And it was really just such a nice break from my day job of following the authoritarian takeover of America.
Yeah, no, it's a really relaxing escape in that way.
That's exactly what I was looking for. But I absolutely love the show. I love season 4, which we're here to talk about.
Thank you.
I do want to start with a broader question about the series. It first aired in 2019, but I think it was first developed for TV in 2016, right before Trump won. What was your vision for the series back then? And to what extent was that original vision shaped by the political environment at the time?
It's a great question. And when we took it out and pitched it, it was really meant to be celebrity satire. And it was going to be a satire really on Hollywood. That was how we pitched it. And, you know, because we had, it's so actually interesting, it occurs to me that, so Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, who the executive producers along with me, it's like, it feels like they went ahead and took that energy and put it in the studio. But that was what we started out with. Seth always had the best log line for that version of The Boys, which he said, "What if Iron Man was Robert Downey Jr.?" I thought that was really good. And so then we sold it, and then Trump got elected, and I was in the middle of breaking the pilot. And as you know, the people I was breaking it with, and we were all talking, and we reached this conclusion very early on, like this observation of like, it's like this is at the intersection of authoritarianism and celebrity, right? Like a character like Homelander is inherently fascist, but has such stage presence, you know. And once we realized that, we're like, oh shit! Like, I wish I could say I did it intentionally. I did not. But we stumbled onto the perfect metaphor for the moment. And once we realized we had that, then we said, well, we just have to run in that direction as far as we can.
It's funny you mention that because, we are in an era where the rise of authoritarianism is by no means uniquely American.
Right.
But I've always thought that Donald Trump is a uniquely American authoritarian, partly because, of course, an authoritarian that came to America would be rich and famous and a celebrity. How did you think about sort of the connection between, I mean, obviously you satire both celebrity and politics in the show, but how do you think about the connection between the two and how they work together as the season has gone on?
Between celebrity and politics?
Yeah.
What we realized was the biggest sin that the superheroes could commit was hypocrisy. You know, that, and I think that's something that celebrities and politicians have in common. So there's the Venn diagram there really overlaps.
Yeah.
of, you know, where we really started was, okay, whoever they are on stage, whatever their mask is, it's always the dead opposite of what happens when they take their mask off. So Homelander is so genial and Superman, God, you know, savior, but he's just a raging sociopath. A-Train is like the gee-aw shucks athlete, cocky, but then behind closed doors, he's just taking performance enhancers and terrified that he's going to lose.
Right.
So in that way, we sort of built the characters as hypocrites, and so I think there's a lot of, you would know better than me, swimming in that water, but like, to me, it's like what, celebrities, but politicians present to the public as purely a manipulation game. And then behind closed doors or backstage are like, oh yeah, that was for them.
Yeah.
Let me get a question. Does that happen?
I think it happens too often.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that.
I think also there's an aspect to the public to be a politician, and especially if you are an authoritarian politician, you need the support of the public. And I think what we've learned over the last decade, and what you guys satirize in the show so well, is that building that support is partly about politics, but it's partly about entertainment.
Right.
And it seems like there's such a premium in the show on making sure that all the soups are as entertaining as possible to the public.
Right. And like people give us, we catch, obviously, you won't be surprised to hear that we catch a lot of shit online for, especially from people on the right. And, my point has always been like, I'm from a small town in Ohio. Like, I have no quarrel with you. My problem is with these people up top who are telling you that they have your best interests at heart, and they do not, and they're just riling you up, and they're turning us all against each other, and they're doing it for gain and profit.
Yep.
And on both sides, by the way, but mostly that side. And and like, that's what I find so despicable. Like, you're tearing apart the country so you can, amass a little more money and power and another gold toilet. And that's wild to me.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about season 4, which opens on election night and ends with political violence after the most famous and powerful person in America is acquitted of criminal charges. So,
yeah.
It just happened that way. Here's a clip of Homelander's reaction to all the chaos.
Yeah.
Everyone remain calm. We're all very special people. Stop it. Stop.
Everybody, please go home. We can fight, but not like this. Get off.
Bitch! Fucking stay down! Fucking baby killer! Bitch!
Off of her! Kiara? Okay. Help! Help! Somebody, help! Help, please. Kiara.
Saw myself!
Please return to your home. Please exit the facility in an orderly fashion. Please exit the facility in an orderly fashion. Please return to your home. Exit the facility in an orderly fashion.
Very, very special people.
Yeah.
On both sides,
Please,
I'd say.
please go home. You're so special.
I've heard you say that you guys started working on this season not long after the events of January 6th.
Correct.
a date which also serves as a plot point later in the season.
Yeah.
What were those early conversations like in the writer's room about where you wanted this season to go and how much real-world political events would impact the story that you wanted to tell?
I mean, we knew long before any of that that this was going to be the season about an election. Since season 2, we were building up this character, Victoria Newman, who is introduced as a congresswoman, and then you reveal that, she's a secret superhero, and it's always been a little bit of the Omen, right? Of like building this character closer and closer to the White House, which is one of the few storylines we actually took from the original comic. And so we knew we were heading into a political season. And then January 6th happened. And one thing I love about this job is it's therapeutic, like we have a place, and I'm sure you feel that way too, like we're lucky to have jobs where we have a place to put our frustration, and I was so horrified. I was so horrified by January 6th. I was so horrified, as we all were, by the imagery coming out of it. And yeah. Don't,
we can clap for being horrified by January.
Yeah. Just don't be, you're not clapping for January 6th, right? So when the room got together, we just were like, that was horrible. And so this notion, and then, and they were so, and again, my point being is, yes, the behavior was reprehensible, but they were riled up, right? They were intentionally and malevolently and maliciously pointed in that direction and told to go. And so that was what we got to. And we said, okay, so, because anyone who hasn't seen that particular episode, like, that whole riot is manipulated, it wouldn't have happened had the superheroes not sort of, got in there and poked around and riled everybody up. So that was something that we wanted to depict. And yes, and then because the climax of the season happens to take place on, like when the electoral votes are counted, we're like, well, that, we can sort of make that the end point. So we start on election night and we end on January 6th.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the simplest way to put it is I think we were just processing our anger and frustration
through the show.
And through superheroes and orgies and whatever.
In general, how do you balance drawing from real-world events without being too on the nose?
Oh, you don't think we're too on the nose? That's so nice of you.
That's what I said.
Wow, that's so nice. Did Amazon tell you to say that? That's so nice. We are, one of the requirements of the job is we're news junkies, and we all sort of needed to, in a way that, when season 5's over, like, I'm really looking forward to taking just like a short break. You can't. You're stuck, man.
Yeah.
But like,
my monkey's paw.
Yeah, I'm just totally marinated in the news. So it's basically like, usually what would happen would be someone would come in angry. And, we were in the middle of writing that season when, for instance, when Roe v. Wade, was overturned. So we were all angry, but, I don't pretend to know what the women in the room were feeling. And, they were rightfully furious. And so that's where, like, Annie having had an abortion, storyline. So, like, they'll come in and everyone will be, like, emotional and angry. And I'll say, I completely understand. How can we write about it? Like, how can you put that into the show so that you can communicate that? And And so that's kind of where it comes from. We don't just we're not like, oh, that'd be hilarious. We do that more with like celebrity stuff.
Right.
You know, like we have fun with like the Kendall, Jenner Pepsi commercial. Like that's easy to just grab. The political stuff we actually try to process internally a little more.
No fascist takeover would be complete without a giant propaganda machine, and of course, VOT is no exception. You guys frequently in the show satirize right-wing media, but there's an especially darkly funny moment at the end, towards the end of season 4, where Ryan, Homelander's son, appears in the Avenue V Christmas special, which is basically like a Fox News version of Sesame Street.
Yeah, exactly. If Sesame Street was on Fox News.
Right. I think we have a clip of that.
All right.
Merry Christmas, A-Train.
Oh, Merry Christmas, Ryan.
Why the long face?
Antifa.
What's that?
Well, Ryan, it's a word for people who hate superheroes and America even more than they hate Christmas.
Well, what do they look like?
That's the problem. They can look like anyone. Your neighbors, your teachers, even your mom and dad.
When you see something, say something. Report that groomer when he comes for you. See something, say something. 'Cause he hates America and Christmas too. It's the woke principal and his husband Chad. Or could be your uncle who says soups are bad. It might even be your mom and your dad. But listen,
Tommy, can we cut out for a second?
That's a cut on rehearsal.
That's a cut.
Hey, is everything okay?
I mean, yeah, it's just we're telling kids to report on their own parents.
Lyrics were approved by your dad, personally, so.
Right, yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's no problem. I just need to go 10-1. Yeah.
I laughed so hard when he just said Antifa.
yeah, right?
Antifa.
Paul Grelong, one of our great writers that always made, even in script, it always made me laugh because it was like deep sigh. Antifa. So good.
Why did you want Ryan to be part of VOT's propaganda machine?
So this has a dark backstory. So one memory that always really stuck with me that I would bring up in the room a lot is I was at the, this is such a downer, I was at the Holocaust Museum. And one of the exhibits that I found so fascinating was in like circa 1939, there was a board game that for kids, and it was basically kick the Jew out of Germany.
Oh my God.
And it was like basically a Candyland style game, and they looked like rats, and you had to like flush Germany of the Jews and get them out of the country. And it was a popular game for children, right? And so I was super interested, and I told you it was dark. I was super interested in like we all think of, you know, George Orwell in 1984, or at least we did. I think now we're actually getting a real front row seat as to how propaganda really works. And it's entertaining, and it's slick, and it's weirdly defendable because you're like, it's America.
Yep.
And so, like, what are you, un-American that you don't like my propaganda? You know, so, but one part that people don't talk about is you know, propaganda towards children is a very important part of it.
Yeah.
And so I was very interested in like, I want to see, you know, like, I kept asking, I was like, can we do like the Homelander youth? Like, how do we get like the children into it? Because that's so insidious and it's such the playbook.
Yeah.
And you know, we had we actually, in our spin-off show, I did not create, the puppets were not our idea. It was in the spin-off, and I just love them so much. And I was like, we have to use these Sesame Street puppets. And then our composer, Chris Leonards, who's our composer, he writes all of those songs. So, everything from
Catchy tune.
Yeah, right? It's like Earworm,
Yeah.
And he wrote, Put the Christ Back in Christmas, the Vaught on Ice one. And he wrote that one, and that one just makes me, report that groomer when he comes for you. It's just so dark, but so funny.
Like a children's propaganda show is like one of the few terrifying ideas I haven't seen come out of the Trump White House, and that was like my first reaction to that. And then I thought about it, and apparently there's like a school in Oklahoma where they are they have a curriculum where they're teaching kids like the alternate history of January 6th.
Yeah.
And I was like, I guess not. I guess they have thought of that. I guess that.
Yeah, and everything from pulling like fucking Judy Blume from the elementary school libraries,
Yeah, right.
or the books on like whatever they consider proper living. Like it is happening. It's just not happening on a nationally broadcast puppet show.
Yeah. So
things are going great, you guys.
You introduced Firecracker this season. This is a soup version of a right-wing TV host. Though I saw you said the inspiration for Firecracker was not a right-wing TV host, but close enough, a right-wing politician, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah, there's a lot of Marge in there, but also like Lauren Brobert and Laura Loomer, and they're. What I found interesting, and what the room found interesting, was there was Trump, of course, but then there were like these like highly concentrated, like uber Trump minions who as far as ridiculous as I think he is, were like if he was orange juice, they're like concentrated orange juice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like and they just were so. So filled with the Kool-Aid and just so rambunctious. And I was like, wow, what if we gave him somebody like that, who is even a little more, radical than he is. And what a great, propaganda mouthpiece that would be.
Well, it's funny because I had this experience of, going through the show at the same time as I'm watching the news. And there is this element of the incentives are for people in the party or in the administration to behave like Trump because they know that that's how they advance in the party. They also know that's how they make money, how they win the election, and you can sort of see the transformation. And so some people are like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was always there, but like Marco Rubio this week was at a congressional hearing and just reading talking points and just became full MAGA. Almost like more of like the Deep's transformation sort of, as he becomes more of a supplicant.
Yeah, but like it's like, and like I said, it better than me. I'm like an outsider looking in, but to me it's like, oh, so at some point it became WWE wrestling.
Yeah.
And so these characters are coming in, and they're coming in like, so putting on this position, putting on this character that they're doing. And so that's what, and Val, who plays Firecracker, she's always really careful about like when she's in like a private moment that means something to her, like she loses like 80% of the accent. And like she's still from Florida, but like she's a totally different, more thoughtful person. Yeah. And then she goes on stage and then she's like frothing at the mouth.
Right.
And I thought that was such an interesting, smart choice because, yeah, exactly. It's wild. They're all just like turning themselves. It's the culture warrior thing, right? They're all turning themselves into these culture warriors.
This season marks another political shift that has real life parallels. For a while, everyone who's trying to stop Homelander thought they could turn the public against him by exposing his crimes, his lies, his true self. This season, Homelander fully comes to the realization that he can get away with just about anything as long as he has enough devoted followers. Was that a long plan shift, or was that based on sort of where the real world events were going, or?
I mean, we ended season 3 with him, murdering somebody in broad daylight, and then the crowd cheered. And yeah, that was probably, there was a certain inspiration of like someone saying they could do whatever they wanted on Fifth Avenue, and people would cheer for them, and that was part of it. But so that was set, and and then it's months later, if not close to a year, that we start writing. So we knew there's one way you could track the boys is in the methodical psychological breakdown of Homelander. And he's at a level of sanity season 1, he's a little crazier season 2, he's a little crazy. So like we're at season 4 out of 5, and the realization that he didn't have to wear the mask.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they like me like this. They want me to be this monster. Is taking off handcuffs that he had been wearing up to that point, because it was important to him that everyone thought he was this, very genial Superman type. And then he realizes, like, oh, the people don't even want that.
Yep.
Like, they want me to stoke their fears and hatred. So, okay, I'm going to go do that.
Well, it's interesting because there's the psychological sort of breakdown of Homelander, but I'm particularly fascinated with the interplay with the public, because you get the feedback that, oh, it's a good thing. And I mean, I remember we've been going through this with Trump for a decade now, which is he does something, you're like, surely this will turn the base against him. Yeah. And this will be it for him. And like, this is, even if he has no shame or whatever else, like when people find out about this is going to be the thing. And then it actually just gins everything up more.
Yeah. 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 I think Homelander does all that. I think also we try to make clear the point that like the people who love him, he absolutely despises. Would not piss on them if they were on fire. Like they're disgusting, they're beneath him. And so, where the real hypocrisy comes for us in the later seasons is how he's riling everybody up, and they're coming for your children, and they're going to turn your children into trans, non-binary socialists. Yep. And then behind closed doors, like I always wanted to do this moment that we never could quite fit in, which is like he's shaking all these people's hands, and then just Purell every single time, because they're all so gross to him.
Right.
And I think that's the point. I think the point is he hates people are being manipulated and used, and we have to do a better job of questioning authority. We just have to.
Yeah, and that he doesn't have contempt for anyone as much as he has his own supporters, his most loyal supporters.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
right.
part of it.
Yeah.
You guys do a great job of portraying authoritarian movements as not just a vehicle to gain power, but a vehicle for belonging, for grievance, for vengeance, for working through past trauma. Can you talk about the story you want to tell through the show about what motivates people's descent into fascism?
Yeah. That's a really good question and an important point. And we did as much research as we could, because we were really interested in, like, when people go down these rabbit holes, like why?
Yeah.
And to the point of, like, separating ties from their families, and it gets so extreme, and it happens so suddenly, and where does it come from? And just based on some of the homework we were doing, and obviously I'm sure there's a million reasons, but the one that I thought was so interesting, we gave that speech to Firecracker in episode 2, where she's like, people are scared and frustrated, like they're losing their jobs, they can't afford their groceries, they know people who are being ravaged by oxy or fentanyl or something. And mainstream politicians, up to that point, did I think a pretty piss poor job of saying, like, we really understand and we're on it, and I think they felt adrift, right? And so suddenly, voices come in to say, the reason that you're in that position is because there's this great evil that is attacking you, and we are actually, you're not, helpless and poor. You're a warrior, fighting this incredible evil, and it's happening in the basement of the pizza shop, and it's happening, with like Tom Hanks and Oprah, and like you can fight it though. Right? And all you got to do is donate to my campaign and come to my rallies. And that's really intoxicating to feel like it's what they're offering people, or at least, just again, one take on it is they're offering people power and agency in a place that they're just not getting it in other places.
Yep.
And to my point, that it's like they're not bad people. They're scared and lonely people, and the powers that be just know how to use that to their own ends.
Well, and I also think about because you have a lot of Homelander's backstory in this season as well as some of the other soups, and you realize again something that I've noticed in our world, which is a lot of, like, we all have flaws, we all have things in our past that have caused trauma, right? We've all gone through things. But when someone is really, really powerful and has a past where there's a lot of trauma, oftentimes we all suffer for that. There's times where you're like, if someone had just, if Donald Trump's father had just like hugged him as a kid, or if like, people had hung out with Elon Musk more, then maybe we wouldn't be in this situation. And that happens with a lot of the soups. They all have something in their background that they're trying to compensate for.
Yeah, I mean, part of that comes from, I have a hard time writing like the straight up villain. I get confused by it of like someone who's like wakes up in the morning and is like, I'm going to do some evil today.
Right.
Right. That's a hard psyche to justify, but to wake up and say, oh, I'm going to do the right thing, or I'm going to scratch this itch in my psyche that I just can't help myself from scratching. So I'm always really interested. I'm like, well, but how did they get that way? Right. And what made them like that?
And how do they justify it? And how do they find the rationalization?
Right. And what happens if they had, their dad had hugged them a little more? Exactly. Right. And so hence that sort of backstory scene for Homelander where, I really wanted to explore like, well, he doesn't come out of the blue. Like, that's a product of upbringing and poor choices and the mistakes of the generation in front of you. And it's just this trauma keeps bonking around through all the generations from the mistakes that they make until you just make the choice to, try to break it. And that's the part of that is the magic of Anthony Starr, which is like, he's so insane in that episode. Like, he makes a guy masturbate in front of everyone, and if the guy can't reach completion, he's gonna laser his penis off. And manages to make you feel for Homelander. like that's a magic trick that you're like, oh God, I really feel terrible for what you went through as he's committing the most atrocious torture on these people. And he just has a way of like, I always say to him and to everyone, I'm like, I do not need anyone to be sympathetic to Homelander, and in fact, they should not be. But we should make an effort to understand him.
Can I ask, how does a scene like that come up in the writer's room? Does like one writer say, hey, I got an idea? Or is it a kernel of an idea and then you all sort of build on it together? I mean, you've got to feel really comfortable with each other to be able to propose something like that.
It's a very, very safe space. Everyone knows the gig walking into the room, and, you can't have necessarily like guardrails. You're just sort of talking. I can't remember who came up with that one, but it came reasonably late in the process, and I think originally it was like twisting the guy's arm or something, and we were just like, it's not just insane enough. It's just not humiliating enough. It's just not. It doesn't get in your head.
Yeah.
And someone was like, well, we should make him masturbate in front of everybody. and what's great about our room that we get paid for, we're like, that's a really good idea.
I'm sure that person's going to want the credit, so speak up. A lot of the characters this season have those personal arcs that we see play out between all the chaos. How do you guys think about threading those like very human moments through a show that's just so explosive?
It's honestly to me, it's actually the most important part of it, because, look, the show takes wild hairpin turns in tone, like it'll go from satire to super violent to, just these insanely sexual moments to like a heartbreaking, emotional scene. And the only way the audience would ever go along on that ride is if they love the characters and they want to follow the characters through that sort of insane Disney,
yeah,
like Mr. Toad or whatever ride. So you need to love those people. That was always my first thing. I was like, we need to love them. And so we really spend, it takes us about 3.5 weeks to break an episode. We probably spend 2 of those weeks doing nothing but talking about characters and psychology and motivation and, where do we want them to start? Where do we want them to end? How do we get the steps to get there? And then once we start to know that, the scenes start to coalesce around, the show. If you watch carefully, almost every scene moves a character forward emotionally.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's very intentional. And because I always said from the beginning, because the comic is, it's funny, the comic is way more violent and explicit than the show by a factor of quite a lot.
Wow.
And so we always knew the show was going to be outrageous, but I always said, and subversive, but I always said, the most subversive thing the show could do would be to make you cry. So that was always my goal, like how do I get the audience to like tear up at a moment? Because that's the last thing you're expecting for this show.
Yeah. Season ends with Homelander essentially in charge of a country where martial law has been declared, and I think we have one more clip of that moment.
And that is why, as my first official act under Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution, I am declaring martial law and deputizing hundreds of superheroes nationwide who will report directly to Homelander himself.
Thank you, Mr. President. Victoria Newman. She's a great American and a dear, dear friend. Murdered in cold blood by deep state starlighters embedded in our own government. Now that we have full legal authority, a veritable army of superheroes will be called upon to rout these traitors from our government and from our streets. America will be safe again. And to the starlighters, whatever rock you're hiding under, we're coming for you. I'm coming for you. Because today, a new age of superheroes begins.
So We've talked a lot about real-life parallels. Is the choice to end the season with a declaration of martial law an attempt to stay ahead of reality? Or is it a prediction of where we might be when season 5 starts?
So,
do you feel the need to sort of outdo or outrun the craziness of the moment?
I mean, it starts. We wrote all that before the election, and we had, in hindsight, naive hopes, and
I feel you.
Yeah, right. And so part of it was like, and we also knew that we're heading into the 5th season, which is going to be our final season, right? So it's time to like blow the doors off it. Mm-hmm. And we keep threatening that Homelander is going to take over the country. You know, it's now or never. You know, it's part of it is just makes good narrative sense. Like you're heading into the climax season. It's time to blow up the show. It's time to change the world. And can our heroes overcome that, you know, for the final run? You know, my hope was, because that conversation came up of like, how far should we skew from reality or not skew from reality? And at the time we were like, well, let's make it like a cautionary tale, you know? And like, so hopefully everyone will be like, woo, we dodged that bullet.
Let's hope.
And then we all got hit with the bullet. And so we'll see, you know, we'll see. I mean, you know, I won't spoil season 5, but there's a lot of stuff that we were writing in season 5 that has sort of already come to pass.
Wow.
And I think, you know, and so I'm going to write, people come up to me, they're like, will you just please write a fucking happy ending? And I'm like, I don't really have control over any of this. This is just we're writing about, you know, we're swimming in that water, and that water tends to, you know, unfortunately, you know, be on the news for real.
Well, I do want to ask about our heroes, because we haven't talked about them as much, but there's a moment in this episode in the finale where Huey basically preaches forgiveness and mercy, not just as moral values, but as a strategy for de-escalation, in the belief that, you know, they can't beat Vought and Homelander and the Supes by acting just like them. Is that a theme you want to keep exploring in season 5?
100%. I mean, look, to me, if the show, I actually find, and people laugh when I say this, but like, there's a beating heart of hope to the show. I actually think if you look underneath all the blood and cynicism, you know, we always really try to layer in that there's love and humanity and hope in the world, and it's worth fighting for. And that, and if the show has any one theme over the episodes, it's that anyone who is standing in front of you and trying to making a complicated problem simple and saying that they're going to save you, they're lying to you. They're selling you something. Yeah. And that the only way through, and that the only way to really save the world, is 1,000 of these like tiny, unremarkable, boring moments of grace. You know, like making breakfast for your kid, taking care of a neighbor, you know, helping someone with their groceries. And that kind of falls to all of us. That's how it gets done. And so I'm trying, if the show has any one point, it's that anyone that you put forward as a hero who doesn't at least have any kind of self-consciousness about their role are really dangerous and full of shit, and you should question them. You should question them deeply, and you should really try to take care of each other, you know, which I think we hit that message again and again, both in speeches like Huey's, like we have to be human, like we all just have to be human.
Yeah.
And then in action, like the way that like Frenchie and Kimiko have like the sweetest, most old-fashioned love story,
Yeah.
you know, in the middle of all of it. And that's really by design, because we're saying that, like, they have true love. These are real things. These are tangible things. And
that are worth fighting for.
That are
make the
worth
whole
fighting
thing-
for. That you have to, not only are they worth fighting for, they're what you fight with.
Yeah.
You know?
I know you guys are still working on season 5. Do you know how the show ends?
I do.
How long have you known how the
there's
show
probably like 3 or 4 people in the audience who work on the show who also know how it ends. Try to guess who they are.
How long have you known how the show ends?
Certainly since the beginning, since we started breaking the season, which would have been, I mean, quite a while ago. It was probably middle of 24. The way we did it was, you start usually when you start a writer's room, and we'll spend, you know, a month, 5 weeks just doing nothing but talking about like the whole season, and then we'll pitch it, and then we'll start breaking it down into episodes.
Okay.
And so what we really talked about a lot in that first month was, I said, okay, let's talk about, like, I don't care how they get there. I don't care what, like, the action scene is going to be. Like, you know that moment at the end of a thing that's like a montage cut to the slow part of Layla? Like, I was like, what's that sequence, right? Where do they all end up? Who lives? Who dies? You know, if they do live, where are they? What are they doing? Do they get a happy ending? Do they not deserve a happy ending? Like, let's figure all that out. And so the thing I knew first in the whole season, actually, was the last 10 pages of the finale.
Oh, wow.
And then once you're like, okay, I feel good about that, and I've slept on it, and that feels like emotionally satisfying for everybody, then you just start working backwards. You know, you're like, okay, how do we get them to that
point?
That point.
Anything else you can tell us? Any other previews about season 5? Any other hints?
No.
Okay, I thought I had to try. Eric, thank you so much.
John, this was so great.
Fantastic
Thank you.
for writing a fantastic show. We're so excited about
Thank
next
you,
season.
everybody, for being here.
Thank you,
really
everyone.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it.